the tunnels of the Kotel in Hebrew. First of all, the priests are in Hebrew the Kohanim. They were in charge of the temple, the Beit HaMikdash, and they were also in charge of its vessels and the offerings that were brought to the temple. The priests used to live west of the Temple Mount, on the other side of the valley we've mentioned previously, a few hundred feet behind you. 2,000 years ago, the temple itself stood only a few feet behind me. So in order to cross the valley and to go to the temple, the priests would walk on the great bridge that you see here. And now, have a look to the big vault above our heads. This vault is a remnant of this 2,000-year-old bridge. And this is exactly where we are standing. So let's sum up. 2,000 years ago, the priest's neighborhood stood a few hundred feet behind you. The temple stood only a few feet behind me. And above our heads, this great bridge would lead the priests, the Kohanim, from their houses to the courtyard of the temple. Thank you very, very much. I will be honest with you and I will tell you the truth. And the truth is that the original bridge was destroyed during the Great Jewish Revolt against the Romans. But the Romans themselves rebuilt it a few years later, and therefore we are standing a part of the bridge that was rebuilt by the Romans a little bit less than 2,000 years ago. So that's a brand new bridge. However, the foundations are still the original ones, dating back to the Second Temple period. The priests weren't at all the only ones that would come to the temple, and basically everybody would come to this place. For example, 3 times a year during what is called the 3 pilgrimage festivals, or in Hebrew the Shalosh Regalim, which are the festivals of Passover, Pesach, that was celebrated a little bit more than 1 month ago, the festival of the Pentecost, Shavuot, which is going to be celebrated in a little bit less than 2 weeks, and the festival of the Tabernacles, Sukkot. People would come from all Israel and even from abroad to bring their offerings, their korbanot, to God. A woman who gave birth, a farmer who picked the first fruits of the harvest, or someone who was simply willing to express his gratitude towards God would also bring his or her offerings to God. And non-Jews too would come to this place accordingly to the prayer King Solomon said when he inaugurated the first temple. I am also speaking on behalf of the foreigner who does not belong to the people of Israel, but has come from a distant land for your name's sake. To enter the temple, one had to be in a state of ritual purity, what is called in Hebrew tahara. And in Judaism, one purifies himself through water. He needs to immerse himself in a ritual bath, what is called a mikveh. So the process is the following. One goes down several stairs in order to get to the bath itself. In the bath, in the mikveh, the entire body has to be covered with water. Around 170 ritual baths mitzvahot from the Second Temple period were covered around the Temple Mount. So far, 6 of them in these tunnels. So before we leave this room, if you want to see some remnants of the 2,000-year-old ritual bath, if you want to see the stairs that used to lead to the bath,
that? Oh, stalactites.
Talk about the Second Temple. We really need to work with our imagination to try to understand how big and how beautiful it was 2,000 years ago. Actually, we are already familiar with this white, tall building. It was inside it that you could find the most important room, the holiest room, the Holy of Holies, or in Hebrew, the Kodesh HaKodeshim. Only one single man in the entire world was allowed to enter this room. Only once a year. It was the Jewish high priest, in Hebrew the Kohen Gadol, only during the most solemn day of the Jewish calendar, the day of Yom Kippur, the day of atonement. So after having prepared himself for several days and after having immersed himself in a ritual bath in a mikveh, the high priest would enter the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh HaKodeshim, in order to perform the service. And right after that, he would pray on behalf of everyone for a good and sweet year to come. Right next to the Holy of Holies was the High Court of Justice of Israel. We have already talked about this great bridge that enabled the priests, the Kohanim, to go from their neighborhood to the courtyard of the temple. Most of the people, however, will enter the Temple Mount through two gates that were located at the south. People would usually enter through the right and they would exit through the left. But three categories of people would do the contrary, so they would enter through the left and they would exit through the right. These people were mourners, people who had someone sick in their house, and people who had lost a precious object. So at first sight, this seems to be quite a strange system, given that it provokes an inevitable situation of walking against the current. However, when these people would walk in the opposite direction, the rest of the population could notice them. They could understand that some misfortune had occurred to them, and since then they were going to offer them some support, some help, some comfort, and therefore this was a very useful system at a time when all the means of communication that we know today, Facebook, Twitter, and so on, didn't yet exist. Unfortunately, the Jewish sources tell that at some point, instead of keeping these values of helping each other, the Jews started drifting away from each other. And as a result, the temple lost its meaning, and this led to one of the biggest catastrophes of the Jewish history. In Hebrew, it is called the Churban. And this word is a terrible one, since it means not only the destruction of the temple and the destruction of Jerusalem, but also the massacre of hundreds of thousands of people and the beginning of an exile which will last for 2,000 years. So we have already explained that after the destruction of the temple, several rulers succeeded each other in Jerusalem. And we have told how in the 14th century the Muslims built this new area which happened to almost entirely cover the western wall of the Temple Mount. And we have told how that this is how today only a very small part of the wall is still visible from the outside. This small part is what is commonly called the Western Wall, or simply the wall. It was Six-Day War that the Israeli paratroopers took the control of the old city of Jerusalem and of the world. It was 46 years ago. Next week it's going to be exactly 46 years ago. And since then, the wall is open to everybody, Jews and non-Jews alike, at any moment of the year, by day or by night. After the Six-Day War, a huge excavation began underneath the houses and the buildings of the Mustang Quarter in order to enable the discovery of the continuation of the Western Wall. This is a part of the tunnels of the Western Wall. We entered here, then we walked through these corridors, and you are now sitting in this big cross-shaped hall, exactly where you see the little light. In front of us, we see the big wall with the big stones and the orange light. In front of us is, for the first time since we entered the tunnels, the continuation of the Western Wall. And in one moment we're going to get closer to it. Then we'll walk along this line in order to keep on discovering the continuation of the wall. Are there any questions? Yes?
Is there a reason for the central bit to be a T-shape?
So the T-shape of the temple is there any reason for that? So actually I'm using the expression T-shape because really it looks like a T, but it wasn't meant to look like a T. Basically, if you look at it from a certain angle, you can see that it has the same shape as a lion. Like you can imagine that this is the head of a lion, and then you have his legs, a lion sitting. So the lion is the king of the animals, and it's a way of saying that this place, which is the place where God dwells in the world, since God is the king of the world, so the shape reminds you of the shape of the lion. But since it's a little bit complicated for people to picture a lion, I use the expression T-shape. But it has nothing to do with a T.
במקום הזה יש כאן בנו חלק מהקורבנות, בואו נמשיך את הפרק הזה, לא בסדר? עלו איתם לבית המקדש, 13 הרגלים שדיברנו עליהם. ולכן, בואו נראה ילדים, ולכן